today in Rich in Relationship. We're going to talk about the fear of intimacy. Well, some would argue that the purpose of marriage is to create deeper and deeper intimacy in a relationship. Trust me when I say so many of us have fear of intimacy. Welcome to another episode of Rich in Relationship. And this episode, Behind Closed Doors, Confronting Fear and Infidelity in Intimate Relationships, is really about intimacy. And what are we all so afraid of? And trust me when I say so many of us have fear of intimacy. This is, I'm not sure, is this the fifth or sixth in the series on self-sabotage in marriage? And one of the biggest sources of self-sabotage in marriage has to do with the fear of intimacy. Why is it one of the biggest? Well, some would argue that the purpose of marriage is to create deeper and deeper intimacy in a relationship. Sure, marriage is a great way to save money on overhead, like the cost of living and food and taxes, but it's a great way to have children and to create progeny and a legacy in the world. But at its heart, marriage is the opportunity for two people to bear themselves to one another and feel safe doing it. And I know that so many of you hear that and have a reaction. Some of you feel fear. Some of you say, yeah, I want that. Some of you are confused. Well, let's talk about it in this episode. In this episode, we're going to talk about what is intimacy. We're going to talk about the fear of intimacy, and we're going to talk about some of the things that threaten intimacy. Some people call it infidelity, but I'm just going to call it breach of trust, because I think it's much deeper than what that word infidelity brings up. Let's begin with, what is intimacy really in the context of the marital relationship? How does it encompass the emotional, the physical, and even the psychological aspects of marriage? As I intimated in the introduction, intimacy is about not only bearing ourselves one to another, but accepting one another as we are. And why would we ever want to do that, right? Because self-acceptance and the knowledge that others accept us as we are, with all of our faults, warts, sins, things that we feel guilt and shame about, all of it is incredibly healing. In fact, the answer, the healing, the only way to really heal shame is to air it out. And when we get married, we're not sitting there thinking, finally, someone I can air my shame out to. What we're thinking is, oh my God, this person sees me for all of who I am and all of who I could be. They will support me in becoming the best person that I am and that I can be. And that's what this relationship is going to do for me. And that's what I'm going to do for them in this relationship. We're going to grow ourselves individually. We're going to grow the relationship. And under this agreement that we have called marriage, we're going to grow our family and grow our influence in the world. And that's super exciting. Do we think in that moment, what if she sees that deepest thing I'm ashamed of? No, in that moment, we're living in the promise. We're living in the future. Then we have children and it starts to get real. We slip into parallel lives and then we start slinking around in our stuff. Then we start getting triggered. In fact, very often when people get married, it's as if they invited their mother and father into themselves or into the other person. The other person maybe shows up as that parent we most need to heal our relationship with in our eyes. Not that they might actually be acting like them too. Or we show up as that person we most need to heal, the person we've been avoiding the most. And we do it so that we can see that person in us and heal that relationship. And what comes out of that is distrust. What comes out of that is a lack of safety. What comes out of that is we pull apart from that incredible vision that was created when we were in love and we got married. We pull apart from that and we become more individualized again. And to some extent, that's healthy. We can't live life completely enmeshed in another human being the way we are when we're in love. The reason why in love is a short-term prospect is it's not a healthy way to live in the long run. It's awesome when you're in it, though. God, it's better than Rocky Road ice cream. It's better than anything you can think of that's really exciting and fun. That in love, in some ways, is better than sex. Though sex is pretty good. Sex in love is even more amazing. But the actual experience of being with each other is just vibrant. Well, that's what we're looking to come back to in our marriage. That in love phase is our unconscious minds setting the goal, setting the place that we want to be, the experience we want to have without giving up everything in our lives to have it. It's the blueprint for what we're going to achieve in what I like to call mature romance, because I'm obviously a very mature guy physically, though emotionally I might be about 6 years old. And in order to get there, there are stages that we need to go through. First, as individuals, we're going to need to have our psychological needs met. We're going to need to have our safety needs met, our social needs met, our esteem needs met, and self-actualization. That's from Maslow. That's Maslow's hierarchy of needs. But in terms of intimacy, once those things are met, all right, the first thing that needs to happen in the relationship for intimacy is honesty. We need to share honestly. I'll share a personal story. I'm not sure why I'm inspired to do this, but very recently I wanted to celebrate a birthday. And what I wanted, not even secretly, was for my loved ones to help me set it up and arrange it and celebrate the birthday. And I emailed everyone and reached out to them all. And I got a very lukewarm response at best. But I plowed ahead. And then I got pushback about where I wanted to celebrate it. And so I adjusted. And finally, what started to happen was this birthday celebration that I had envisioned became something that I hadn't envisioned at all. And I decided to cancel it, which shocked everyone. They were totally, like, my family was like, what? Is everything okay? And where my wife went was, oh, he's going to blame me. And in the end, I sat down with her and I said, you know what? I don't blame you. I take complete responsibility for my canceling my birthday celebration. And I need to tell you something. I feel hurt and sad that when I reached out to everyone in the family and asked for help, there was hardly any response because I feel like I have been there for everyone else in that way. And she was able to receive that. She said to me, you know what? It's true. You have been there for everyone else in that way. And I hope that you'll let us as a family celebrate your birthday in a way that would be comfortable for you and for us. Right. So there was something really honest about that. Right. It was like, no, I don't blame you. No, you're not at fault. What I am is I had an expectation and it wasn't met. And she was able to receive that. So when we can communicate with that kind of honesty, we have a foundation on which intimacy can be created. It's hugely different than on another level. Let me be really honest. On another level, what I was experiencing was, I'm not going to have a birthday party because they didn't do what I wanted. It's all their fault. It's not that that sense of blame didn't live for me somewhere inside me. There's a part of me that definitely feels that way. It's about acknowledging that part and then taking responsibility for what really happened, right? And so part of being honest is being honest with ourselves. All right, I get it. There's a part of me that rolls in blame, but in my relationship, the people I really love and care for, that blame isn't going to be helpful. So I can own it and get that that's just a way that I feel, but it's not how it is. And then I can be honest about the feelings that are underneath that pattern of blame, right? Blame is basically a strategy that doesn't really work for anyone. Why doesn't it work? Because there's little or no personal responsibility in blame. And where there is little or no personal responsibility, there can be little or no growth. That's like a law of the universe. All growth comes out of personal responsibility, cleaning up our side of the street. And honesty is based in that. When our side of the street is clean, we can be honest in a way that's clean. By the way, it would have been honest for me to say, it's all your fault. If you had just stepped up when I asked you, that would have been honest. Honest in the sense that I truly had a part of me that felt that way. But that's not the truth of what happened, right? The truth of what happened is that the people who I reached out to have other things going on. The truth of what happened is that there was more urgency for me in that moment than there was for them. The truth of it is, if had I waited a couple of more weeks, maybe it would have become more urgent for them. I don't know, or maybe it wouldn't. But living in the truth, the thing that we all share in, not my truth, but the truth, allows honesty. When there is a foundation of honesty, we begin to build safety. And when you think about intimacy, intimacy is about bearing yourself. It's about being vulnerable. In order to be vulnerable, there needs to be safety. But something else needs to happen after safety. When there's consistent safety and consistent honesty, we start to grow trust in one another. We can trust that even though someone might be feeling hurt, like their expectations weren't met, even though somebody might have a part of themselves that wants to blame, we can trust that they are willing to keep their side of the street clean and express the base emotions instead of the strategy, which doesn't work. And when trust happens and is validated, trust and validate, it's like anything in life, we can then give ourselves permission to show up as vulnerable, meaning, in my case, I like to project an image of, oh, I am a strong and in control male. I can take care of myself. I can keep everyone safe. It's a little illusion I have, by the way, because the truth is I can't keep everyone safe. I don't control the world. I don't control what happens to people. I don't even control their sense of safety. Everything might appear safe, but they might feel it's unsafe. It's a story I tell myself. When vulnerability happens, I can put my story about who I am on the shelf. And then I can say, hey, you know what? I'm not in control. Hey, you know what? I had an expectation and it wasn't met and I feel hurt. Not you didn't meet my expectation and you hurt me, but I had an expectation that I maybe didn't communicate as well as I could, though I did communicate it. I'll give myself credit for that. And I felt hurt. That's about being vulnerable, saying I felt hurt. There's nothing more vulnerable than I feel hurt or sad or fearful, right? That's the land of vulnerability. Anger is the next level up. Anger is I'm sick of being hurt, fearful, and sad. I'm going to take action. And when anger shows up, depending on how it shows up and how it's expressed, trust may or may not continue to exist. That's another podcast. Once we've got a basis of honesty with safety on top of that, trust on top of that, and vulnerability, we can begin to be intimate. What does it mean to begin to be intimate? It means that not only do we show ourselves unreasonable expectations and all, maybe even reasonable expectations, not only do we share our hurts, our sadness, and our fear without expecting it to be fixed, just sharing it, but we love each other for it and appreciate one another. Not only do we share the things that maybe we have guilt about, or maybe we have shame about, things that societally aren't acceptable even, but we love each other and care for each other as part of healing that shame and that guilt. You can see why there might be some fear of intimacy in that case, right? Who do we want to run around and share our deepest shames with? Not many people. And the fear in those intimate moments is that we will be rejected. The fear is in those intimate moments that that trust will be broken. The fear in those intimate moments is that sense of safety we had will dissipate. So fear of intimacy in reality is the fear that we're going to be hurt, rejected, stomped on. But there's another side to this. The truth is that as human beings for thousands of years, we've traveled our lives in these sacks of skin, generation after generation, being comfortable with dishonesty, being comfortable with a lack of safety, being comfortable with distrust, being comfortable with a lack of vulnerability. We've created all kinds of stories and patterns about what marriage should be to cover over our comfort with our incredibly painful states. You should stay in a marriage no matter what, for the sake of the kids, even though studies show that it's maybe the worst thing you can do for the kids if the marriage really doesn't work. You should stay in the marriage because it's a sacred institution. God hates divorce. Now, these things may all be true, by the way. I'm not arguing or saying they're wrong. What I'm saying is that when we continue along in a marriage where there's little or no vulnerability, little or no trust, little or no safety, and very little honesty. When we do it because there's a rule or a law that we have in our hearts about marriage, we hurt ourselves and we hurt the other person. And I'm not saying that we should get divorced when we're in that position. What I'm saying is when we do things for the sake of a rule, it can only make things worse. But when our spirit, our unconscious mind, whatever you want to call it, calls out to us and says, I saw something here and it's still here. I know that that person that I was in love with is still in there. I know that this is just part of the dance that we're doing towards greater closeness and greater intimacy. I'm committed to that person and to the person they saw in me. When we come from that space, there's hope. When we come from that space, love can be blossom. When we come from that space, safety can be reestablished by honesty. Trust can happen. Vulnerability can happen, and ultimately intimacy. And I think many of us are afraid. We're afraid of going down that road because the idea of just living in acceptance of one another is alien. It's alien because so few people have been there. It's alien because our parents didn't do it. Alien because they're do it. It's alien because their parents didn't do it. Going back to the first protozoa or Adam or Eve, whatever story you're going to roll with, it doesn't really matter. The fact is, it's alien. True intimacy is alien. And our spirits yearn for true intimacy. We thirst for the living water of true intimacy. And it's that fear that drives misunderstanding. Either the fear of having that thing that seems so alien, or the fear of having it and losing it, which seems so likely to all of us because it seems alien. It's the fear that drives so many of the challenges in your marriages. And that fear shows up as self-sabotage, which is the point of this show, right? This episode, we're all about self-sabotage. We self-sabotage our marriage by withholding information. We self-sabotage our marriage by allowing that blame strategy to run. We self-sabotage our marriage by distrusting even when there's no indication of trust. We self-sabotage our marriage when we say to ourselves, our needs are not being met in this marriage, and our eye gets caught by someone else who might maybe be able to meet that need for us. The self-sabotage happens because we start seeking a falling in love experience instead of accepting that falling in love experience as a blueprint for mature romance. And so we start talking to other people. Maybe we're at work and we start talking to someone and we like them. They might even be the opposite. Well, it doesn't matter anymore if they're the opposite sex, but for me, they might even be the opposite sex. For you, maybe they're the same sex. I don't know. But there's something about them that has you. You feel secretly attracted to them, but it's work. So you would never go there. But in your heart of hearts, you know that there's something happening there that probably shouldn't be happening, that if you were truly focused on your marriage and the person you love in your marriage, you would not allow that door to open. Is probably a better way to put it. What is that? What do I mean by that? There's a whole episode there. In real life, there are thousands of people we can feel attracted to. In real life, there are thousands of people we could fantasize about having relationships with. And in real life, when we really love someone and we've given our heart to them and our value is personal integrity and we value that experience of giving our hearts to one another so highly, we stop looking. A part of us might notice someone and see a possibility and we'll say to that part, hey, we don't need to look there. Everything that we need is here with this person. It may not seem like it in this moment, but remember that vision we created together when we were in love? Let's hold on to that. Let's keep our eyes on the prize here. We can work with those parts that feel a little pull and redirect them. Hey, the place to go for that emotional intimacy, the place to go for that flirtation, the place to go for that sexual attraction, the place to go for that secret liaison, the place to go for that physical sexual experience is the person we created this vision with. Let's roll with that. That's not a rule, by the way. That's keeping your focus on what you want to create with that person. There's a difference here. Instead, though, what happens is we allow our unconscious mind to roam. We meet that person at work and there's a little interest, and maybe we go to lunch with them and we start complaining about our significant other to them, and they are sympathetic. And there's an intimacy that happens in that complaining with that person that's grounded in that attraction that we've refused to acknowledge, or we've told ourselves, it's okay, we're married. There's an intimacy that happens there that's a form of betrayal if you're in the kind of marriage I'm in anyway. If you're in a, what do they call it now? A polyamorous marriage, this might not be a betrayal, but if you're in a monogamous marriage where you've made a commitment to one another, there's a betrayal that happens there in that intimacy. And it's a slippery slope where you go from that intimacy to something more, to something more, to something more. I'm divorced. It's probably not a big shocker to you or a secret. I'm remarried, 24 years, very happy in my marriage. I applied these principles to my marriage. But I was at work, and there was a young lady. She must have been about 10 years younger than me. And there was that exactly this kind of attraction. And she made it really clear to me. She was a person of faith, by the way, interestingly enough. So she didn't really believe in premarital sex, but she made it really clear to me that if I were getting divorced, that she would definitely be interested. And we had many of these conversations that were betrayals of my commitment to that marriage. And I was in the process of getting divorced. And so it didn't feel like a betrayal. And I remember when it started to become physical, and I just had to stop. Not because I needed to be true to my marriage, but because it was not true to myself I want to be clear, it doesn't really matter, actually. It doesn't really matter how physical we were. I was like just about to say, well, it wasn't that bad. But what was really clear to me is what I was engaging in was a betrayal of my own sense that I needed to be complete with disentangling myself from my marriage. And also that I actually wasn't interested in her in the way that she was interested in me. She was interested in me as a future husband. I was just distracting myself, and I couldn't betray my friendship with that person in that way. And I needed to step out of that. And I learned from that. I learned, number one, really important to be true to self. Number two, very important to consider the ecology, the feelings of the other people around you. Number three, completion, super important. So I had a personal experience of engaging in a kind of intimacy that wasn't appropriate at that time, and the slippery slope that leads to. And it doesn't really matter how far down the slope you slip, right? What matters is that you get on the slope at all. And so beware your unconscious mind and its desire to get entangled with others, to seek fulfillment in others. That is a huge form of self-sabotage. Something like 30 or 40% of all marriages have some form of infidelity. And if we looked at the emotional infidelity that I'm talking about, just having those intimate conversations that are really reserved for your best friend who you married, that would probably up the percentage tremendously. And the consequences of that betrayal, trust is broken, safety does not exist anymore, and you're being dishonest with yourself and the other person. The other person being actually not only the person that you're on the slope with, but your best friend who you married. And the betrayal, the sense of self-betrayal and cleaning that up takes some time, needless to say. The triggers for this are inevitably that you're feeling like your needs are not being met in the marriage. And that's very common. It is very common that as we slip into parallel lives, who's going to take care of the kids next? Where am I going to get my fulfillment at work? That we stop investing in the relationship. And because you only get what you give, because we're not giving to the relationship, we're not getting from the relationship, and our needs aren't being met. And the way to circumvent that problem is to start talking about your needs. And it kind of goes back to that example that I gave you. How are you going to talk about your needs? Are you going to talk about your needs as, you never do it with me anymore, I'm so sexually frustrated? Or are you going to say something more like this: I feel frustrated, hurt, and sad when at night I turn to you for intimacy and you turn your back, because we used to be so loving with each other, and I yearn for that so much. what do you think is going to have greater impact, right? Inevitably, when our needs are not being met, our needs are not being met, the place to start is honesty, right? If you reestablish that foundation, then you can reestablish safety, you can reestablish trust, you can reestablish vulnerability, and therefore intimacy. And it's going to take time. I want to share one last thing with you, and then we're going to talk about the next episode in this series. You need to get that when your marriage is in a place where your needs are not being met and you're not communicating well about it, that in the business that is your relationship, you're near bankruptcy. Safety occurs when you're meeting the basic emotional needs of the relationship. Trust occurs when you're creating surplus of emotional giving. That's what opens the door for vulnerability. Wow, not only are we meeting the basic emotional needs of the relationship, but we're also making sure that our individual needs are met. And there's a surplus. There's like more love going around than I would than we needed to coast. Now we can open the door for trust. Now we can open the door for physical intimacy, vulnerability, closeness, intimacy. Now, right? So when you're in that place of my needs aren't being met and I feel so hurt, it's going to take some reinvestment in the relationship. It's going to take some cleaning up your side of the street. If your needs are not being met and you're feeling hurt and disappointed about it, like my birthday story, the starting point is for you to clean up your side and open your closet and show your dirty underwear to your partner. And don't think that that's going to make it all good like that. You're going to need to do that again and again until they say, wow, she is serious about this. They're not just trying to manipulate me. They're not just trying to get me to do something. They're serious about being vulnerable with me. I'm going to honor that. I feel safe with that. I don't feel like they're trying to pull one over on me. It's going to take time to build up that emotional bank in your relationship again. And I've helped countless couples to go from negative 1 million to positive 1 billion in their relationship. So if you've got questions about this, or if you're in a lot of pain, reach out to me. Go to my website, richinrelationship.com. Just go to richinrelationship.com. You can schedule a free call there. Ping me. Let me know what's going on with you. Everything we talk about is confidential. And I promise you that when I talk about other people's relationships, today I talked about mine. I figured, like, why not? It's really not anyone I've actually worked with. It's usually a composite of people because I don't like telling anyone's specific story. That's a breach of confidentiality. I don't do that. But I'll tell general stories that I know are true for most people. All right. Next week, we are going to talk about constant criticism, continually finding fault in a partner, and how that can erode the relationship and what it does to you and what it does to them. Look forward to hearing from you. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram. Hey, subscribe to this podcast, please. We only know that people love it. This week I saw, hey, we had 8 new subscribers. Woohoo! Yes! It means we're touching people. Subscribe so that we know that we're touching you. Thank you.